let your body rock, rock.
That body rock and you don't stop. 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 That body
Let the bass, let the bass kick. Freestyle. Freestyle. Let the bass, let the bass kick. Freestyle. Let the bass kick. Let the bass kick. Let the bass kick.
We've been pre-booking tickets for months. The park needs a new attraction every few years in order to reinvigorate the public's interest, kind of like the space program.
To reinvigorate the public's interest,
Kind of like the space program.
to reinvigorate the public's interest, kind of like the space program.
The truth is infectious. People resonate with any form of truth simply because we're very curious beings, and we find great satisfaction in understanding life's mysteries, and will typically stop at nothing until we've exhausted all avenues to find ultimate truth. The truth is especially infectious when there's been a concerted effort to hide or distort the truth for several generations, when the world at large, namely the scientific community and specific government agencies, have constructed a false paradigm or faulty model of the world disseminated across all forms of media and education, it becomes extremely difficult for the truth to catch hold. In order for the infectious truth to become widely considered and understood, it must be carefully inspected by each individual person, setting aside all preconceived assumptions or the so-called conventional wisdom, which is extremely difficult, indeed compounded and reinforced by one's level of education. Most people, especially those in the United States, are by default incapable of simply considering theories or models outside of the conventionally accepted models or agreed upon world. This is due to relentless theories, assertions, and so-called laws, which are professed over our lifetime as irrefutably factual. Unfortunately, many of the theories, assertions, and yes, even the so-called laws are at best hypothetical explanations of humanity's collective observations and mysteries over the millennia, although many such conclusions and assertions were formulated during historical periods that didn't fully understand critical fundamentals of nature, which our modern world is extremely familiar with. With our modern understandings in play, it's important to revisit some of these antiquated, possibly obsolete and incorrect assumptions. Contemporary pillars of science and technologies involving electromagnetism, extended high-altitude flights, long-range radio towers communicating over distances which should be completely obscured by the unavoidable curve of the Earth, are a few luxuries those who built the foundations of our understandings were not privy to. Our modern understandings, such as the Antarctic being far colder on average and by record than the Arctic, or the forced dismissal of accounting for curvature in terms of architecture and engineering, should force us to revisit the widely accepted belief system of a spherical Earth. Furthermore, what sort of scientific observations and discoveries will be made from this point forward that will automatically be forced into the globe model or forced to fit into the globe Earth model, since that is what all scientists must do? It is a real shame, although a bit ironic or comical, but any new discoveries made by modern science will instantly be forced into the globe Earth heliocentric model, since this model is one of the fundamental pillars of theoretical understanding of our world and the so-called universe. In order to be an astronomer, for example, you must, by definition, adhere to the conventional heliocentric model very stringently, else you wouldn't be much of an astronomer in terms of, degree-toting, card-carrying, globularist astronomer. Indeed, considering the world as a stationary plane is so far beyond the scope of possibility for a typical astronomer, or your average person for that matter, the thought would never cross their mind, nor would they entertain the idea, were it presented to them very logically and completely. Only by each individual person making a conscious, determined decision to examine those dear assumptions and so-called laws very critically and at a fundamental level do they stand a chance to grasp this relatively new renaissance of the fixed stationary Earth model. One example of such a new scientific discovery I'd like to point to for further study and scrutiny are the plasma tubes recently discovered by undergraduate student Cleo Loy at the University of Sydney in conjunction with CASTRO, which is the ARC Center of Excellence for All-Sky Astrophysics. I'll roll a quick clip of her talking about her recent discovery, but she used a large radio telescope array to get real-time 3D animations of these long theorized and now allegedly discovered and documented plasma tubes in the lower magnetosphere, about 600 kilometers or about 372 miles from the ground.
Due to its molten iron core, the Earth has a magnetic field around it, just like a bar magnet. This magnetic field extends outwards into space, forming a big bubble that we call the magnetosphere. The inner layer of the magnetosphere, from near the Earth's surface up to 1,000 or so kilometers, is called the ionosphere because it is made up of particles ionized by radiation from the sun. In low-frequency radio astronomy, when we point our telescopes to the sky to measure the faint signals that travel through space to reach us, we need to take structures and perturbations in the ionosphere into account that might change these signals. We need a good understanding of the effects of the ionosphere to make sense of our data. Pictured near the surface, the Earth's magnetic field lines run parallel and come out at an angle to the ground. It has long been postulated that tubular plasma structures go along the magnetic field lines, and it is structures like these that can affect our astronomical measurements. Previously, people could only guess what they might look like, since no one has ever been able to image them. My name is Cleo Loy, and I am an astrophysics student with CASTRO at the University of Sydney. I have found that we can use a new type of radio telescope to not only detect these plasma tubes in the ionosphere, but to actually image them. And what's more, we can reconstruct their behavior in real time and in 3D. This is a very exciting world's first. The Murchison Wide Field Array, or MWA for short, is a radio telescope in the Western Australian desert. It consists of 128 receiver tiles, spread over a circular area roughly 3 kilometers across, that work together as one instrument. What makes it so special is its huge field of view, letting us observe a large patch of sky and all sorts of celestial objects as they flash or pass overhead. We use the MWA to study how the ionosphere shifts around the observed positions of objects in the sky and distorts them. A good analogy for this is the way lights at the bottom of a swimming pool dance around when the water ripples. We cannot see the water directly because it is transparent, but from the dancing lights we can determine the pattern of the ripples at its surface. Just like when we are looking at an angle down parallel train tracks, if you were standing at the site of the MWA, the Earth's magnetic field lines would appear to converge. What we saw with the MWA was a stunning distortion pattern that strongly coincided with the magnetic field lines. For the first time, we revealed the true nature of these structures as a vast array of plasma tubes, filling the sky in staggering numbers. The MWA's rapid snapshot capabilities allow us to make movies showing their motions over time. But that's not all. The MWA also has the power to see in 3D. When we look at an object, our brain combines the images from our two eyes, allowing us to judge how far away it is. So by analyzing the signals recorded by MWA tiles in the east, separate to tiles in the west, we give the MWA the ability to perceive depth. This has never been done with a radio telescope before. By using the MWA like a pair of eyes, the three-dimensional nature of the tubes springs into reality. We can measure their heights above the ground, see their steep inclination, and watch as they drift sideways towards or away from the MWA. This is a whole new way of looking at the sky.
This evidence appears to be important, if not really interesting, for a few reasons. First, it goes to show how even with all our modern technology and communications, there are even now many different aspects of our world that we're completely oblivious to, and other aspects which we suspect but cannot prove. Even within the last couple years, astronomers have found a third radiation deflecting belt or force field beyond the two already acknowledged by science up until around 2013. So I find this fascinating that such plasma tubes found by Miss Loy with Castro could be created strictly by magnetic fields and ionization. And a deeper dive into plasma, especially magnetic fusion plasma, is warranted. I don't want to go on too many assumptions here, but it would seem that these plasma tubes could possibly be of the magnetic fusion variety, which means in that case their temperature could reach nearly 180 million degrees Fahrenheit. Furthermore, with magnetic fusion plasma reaching such temperatures, I think it's really important to hypothesize such sources of energy as related to the sun. Videos and images taken of the sun from high-altitude weather balloons clearly shows the sun couldn't possibly be 93 million miles away, as hypothesized by mainstream scientists. Simple mathematics, geometry, and plain trigonometry can easily prove the sun as being very close to our world, within 4,000 miles up. Even using such methods can be misleading due to our observations being skewed by the behavior of light as it passes through these different layers of magnetic fields and atmosphere, eventually being recognized by our eye. One thing that is becoming very clear is that the sun is not necessarily what we've been led to believe all these years, and what you see is not always what you get in terms of the visible light from celestial bodies. With the modern understanding of this elusive state of matter called plasma, which can be created by natural circumstances including magnetic field lines emitted from the Earth, like a vast aura of the world's life force, we should really consider other hypotheses for what fuels the sun. The current model really doesn't make much sense if you think about it. Modern science asserts that a star such as our sun, as if the sun were just another star, 1 in a billion, but the conventional explanation is the sun is a raging inferno of hydrogen and helium with other assorted elements. I, for one, grew up with enough pyromaniacs to know that gases, when ignited, tend to burn up quickly and will tend to run out of fuel eventually. I honestly cannot think of a scenario that would cause such gases to burn for millions and millions of years in the vacuum of space, without any oxygen, of course. But of course, the conventional model has all that figured out and has all sorts of explanations for that, such as, quote,
Well, the sun isn't made of fire. It's made mostly of hydrogen and helium. Its heat and light comes from nuclear fusion, a very different process that doesn't require oxygen. Ordinary fire is a chemical reaction. Fusion merges hydrogen nuclei into helium and produces much more energy.
end quote. This sort of conventional narrative bothers me for a few reasons. The first reason is nobody has ever flown to the sun except Icarus, of course, and well, we all know what happened to Icarus, right? Icarus, of course, was one of those characters out of Greek mythology, the son of Daedalus, who dared fly too near the sun on wings of feathers and wax. Of course, he crashed and burned, falling back to the earth. He certainly didn't orbit around the sun in that story, so at least we know they were flat earthers. Icarus's father, Daedalus, had been imprisoned by King Minos of Crete with the walls of his own invention, the labyrinth, but that's probably a topic for another video. Shall we just say that even NASA hasn't claimed to fly to the sun, so any assertions as to what the sun exactly is made of and the process it uses to generate energy, light, and ultimately heat here on Earth, heat only after filtering through our layers of magnetic fields and atmosphere, but the pictures and animations of the sun from NASA's Lie-mobiles shows the sun as a fiery, hellish nightmarescape, when in fact the conventional narrative claims it's not fire at all. Is it possible that the sun is pulling energy out of the ether, zero-point energy fields, which modern science is barely scratching the surface on? Is it possible that all of the scientists of the world have been tricked into believing a totally preposterous lie, disproof of which is directly in front of their face, but they're too close-minded, too dogmatically religious in the holier-than-holy assumptions of theoretical physics? Yeah, it's very possible, and it's rather ironic and amusing that people construct their entire sense of identity and personality and stability on a model of the universe that was set up to sever our bond with the Creator, perhaps? Could this be the reason why so many people are afraid to consider the flat Earth model, because it will mean they've been rather gullible and, well, incorrect about approximately everything they've believed their entire life? When your parents told you that Santa Claus wasn't real, you probably cried a bit and got angry with them, but you got over it. You didn't ask them, well, what about the Tooth Fairy? Did you? You didn't ask them about that, really, did you?
What's the matter with you? Get him out of there. Why, you... I'll murder you. Well,
Something's tickling me to death.
hey, let's get him in front of that flower scopy and see what's inside of him. Right, come on. Quiet, I'll turn on some of these gadgets, see what happens. Look! What do you know about that?
Oh, my. Have I got something?
Nothing that we can't catch. Hold still, I got an idea. Got a pin? Hand it over. Got any bait? Oh, yeah. Now, open your mouth. Swallow.
No, no, not that.
Boy, he's going after it. He's getting away. There he is.
Hey, have you got a fishing license?
No.
Then give me back my fish.
Here's one.
Oh!
So scientists can estimate the makeup of the sun by the range of light frequencies and other radioactive properties of the sun and hypothesize all sorts of details founded upon earth-based, ground-based laws and principles and observations that may or may not be so rigid in the realm of where the sun dwells and can certainly not be verified if the sun is a super hot, high-gravity ball of gases 93 million miles away. We can hypothesize all day long about what the sun is doing and what it's made of, but in terms of walking up to it and kicking it like a tire to check its roadworthiness, no more can we fly up to the sun and take a few tablespoons of solar surface plasma and verify these hypotheses. And so the scientists are relatively safe to hypothesize with all sorts of conjecture, and nobody can prove them wrong. Nobody except Icarus, of course, and they'll point to all sorts of seemingly logical, seemingly definite Earth-based proof, which are interpretations of behavioral patterns of light and energy, and apply those same rules and laws to the mysterious sun, as if we can indeed walk up to the sun and take a sample of it and give it a swift kick to the hubcap to, check the accuracy of our hypotheses. When the scientist who developed the medical use of X-rays to generate images of bones without hacking people open, and we've been able to improve on those initial inventions and discoveries based on real, intimate, critical science, which always involves the ability to widely verify and repeat the results of any experiment. Before X-rays were used medically or invented, the odd broken bone or tumor, lodged projectiles, etc., were all located and diagnosed by a physical examination only, and of course, a doctor's best guess. The use of X-rays is an obvious instance where the scientific method has found a way to improve medical care, and how theoretical concepts which might seem outlandish can indeed manifest in physical reality, least of which technologies like the use of medical X-rays. I'm pretty sure X-rays are still linked to cancer, but they still give them to you in a hospital for, say, being hit by a car on your motorcycle. I can tell you that firsthand. Anyway, on November 8th of 1895, a German physics professor, Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen, made a fairly impressive discovery. He took a tube similar to fluorescent light bulbs, removed all the air, and filled it with a special gas. When he passed a high electric voltage through it, the tube gave off a fluorescent glow, and Röntgen then covered the tube with a heavy black paper and once again passed electricity through it and noticed a barium-coated screen across the lab begin to glow. So he quickly realized this tube was emitting an invisible light ray, and this ray could pass through the heavy paper covering the tube. He quickly did more experiments and discovered that these new rays could pass through most substances and would cast shadows of solid objects on pieces of film. So he named the new ray X-ray because in mathematics, X is used to indicate an unknown quantity, and within a month, Röntgen gave his report to the Wurzburg Physical Medical Society and to physicist friends across Europe. By January 1896, the world was gripped in X-ray mania, and Röntgen was proclaimed the discoverer of a medical miracle Within a year, X-rays were being used to diagnose and for therapy and were a pretty well-established part of medicine. Of course, now we use MRIs or magnetic resonance imaging and CAT scans for the most detailed, modern look inside, but the important point here is the theoretical sciences are extremely important. However, it's also very important, if not more so important, that we don't get too attached to any model or another that we can't verify the validity of. We honestly shouldn't have so much interest tied up into the shape of the Earth or an attachment to any model per se, or one model that we like over the other, but we should absolutely give it our 100% effort and focus to find the truth. And it appears that more people are waking up to the truth, and for good reason. People are logical, rational entities who resonate with the truth, and this particular truth has been programmed out of the realm of possibility in terms of the culture of our modern society. Whether humanity has arrived at the spherical conclusion in error or in a clever sleight of hand is an important question to ask, but at the end of the day, it is sort of irrelevant. The truth is infectious because it cannot be disproven. The people who argue against this point are not prepared for the argument and will only regurgitate the common lies or misconceptions which have been thoroughly debunked. In order to truly debunk the flat earth or stationary plane model, you must first try to study and understand it. In studying it, you are literally studying the truth, and so you have only two options. You can choose to shut the idea out of your mind and cease scrutinizing it further, or you can continue studying it and continue understanding the alternate correct model further until you really have a firm grasp of how the model we're all pointing to works. At that point, you absolutely must start to compare all the evidence in both the, heliocentric globe Earth model and juxtapose that with the evidence weighed in the flat stationary plane model and ask yourself one big important question, or a few important questions. But you need to ask yourself, am I smart enough to know that I've been fooled since the time I was a small child? Or am I brave enough to consider the implications or consequences of what appears to be a fixed, non-globular Earth? Will I stand by and allow my friends, family, and neighbors to continue to be misled about the very ground which they've walked upon their entire life? This isn't some bizarre conspiracy theory. This is the truth. It's science. To become emotionally attached to a spherical, spinning, twirling around in space Earth model is ridiculous. If you are fixated on that and afraid to consider the implications that your steadfast belief system is completely erroneous, then you are not truly scientific of a person in the slightest. You are at best like a gullible child asking about the tooth fairy when your parents just told you Santa and the Easter Bunny weren't real. Probably even asked about Rudolph, I reckon, but if you fail to see the overwhelming preponderance of empirical evidence that planet Earth is a stationary plane, a unique gargantuan of the known universe, which exists nearby as a feature of our wonderful and mysterious Earth. I could be mistaken about this, but I seem to remember growing up as a fairly avid science geek that the three forms of matter found on Earth would be solid, liquid, and gas, and yet a fourth state of matter called plasma was more or less theoretical and was believed to be possible in obscure places such as well above the world's atmosphere or on the face of the sun. Surely over the last 20 years, much more data and hypotheses are being kicked around by mainstream scientists that I'm aware of, but it's important to remember that none of the said scientists would ever test their hypotheses relative to a stationary plane Earth model, but instead would, of course, instantly apply globe Earth logic and rules to such observations and hypotheses. In other words, would cram such observations to fitting a spinning, twirling globe Earth schematic, since that's what is assumed by all scientists and astronomers, none of which would be responsible for real-world results, such as X-rays imprinting their images, or even giving their tires a good kick once in a while to make sure they're roadworthy. If these plasma belts turn out to be actually magnetic fusion plasma, I'm curious to know what sort of temperatures are involved and what preparations the Apollo astronauts made for the possibly 180 million degrees Fahrenheit temperatures of the plasma tubes, and how passing through such plasma tubes affected the Apollo missions. Surely at least one of the Apollo program shuttles passed through such high-density plasma belts and would have noticed some sort of effect from them, right? Even if they weren't high-density magnetic fusion plasma anomalies, they should have, still experienced some sort of effects. One of the things I found very telling, if not a bit amusing, about scientists' thoughts on this subject, in terms of the plasma tubes on blogs and online, scientists are postulating that these plasma belts could have severe effects on satellites and telecommunications signals. It's as if theoretical physicists and astronomers believe that discovering a natural phenomenon will somehow magically affect ourselves and our world differently than before they were discovered. Of course, this is ridiculous, and the fact that some natural phenomenon of our world has been documented or even hypothesized, ourselves and our gadgets in space will certainly not somehow abruptly become beholden to the, as till now, unforeseen forces just discovered or hypothesized. In any case, the satellites and astronauts would have been exposed to such plasma fields at any point in the past, even though they were not discovered yet.
Something's tickling me to death. Oh,
Hey, let's get him in front of
I've literally had Harvard-trained astrophysicists who worked on advisory boards with NASA insinuate that the gravity affecting Newton would have somehow been different than the gravity affecting Einstein, since Einstein had not yet theorized the warping of space-time during the Newtonian era. No, that is what it is. That's what gravity
view
is.
of nature was
Gravity was a theory designed or theorized to explain the globe model and why we're not flung from the face.
No, that's not what gravity was designed to do at all. It was designed to explain the fact that objects fall. It has nothing to do with the globe model.
Okay, then what is keeping us pinned? Then what is keeping us pinned to the Earth while we're spinning 1,000 miles per hour?
The mass of the Earth, John. That's what
mass of
gravity
the Earth
is due to. It is, yes, because the Earth is not a flat plane. It is mass that weighs.
Gravity is supposedly due to the mass of the Earth warping space-time.
No, John. You're getting confused. You're jumping ahead to Einstein. Warping space-time has nothing whatsoever to do with the Earth's gravity. You're getting confused. You're jumping ahead to Einstein. Warping space-time has nothing whatsoever to do with the Earth's gravity. You're getting confused. You're jumping ahead to Einstein. Warping space-time has nothing whatsoever to do with the Earth's gravity. It's a very teeny tiny effect.
This sort of rationale strikes me as comically ridiculous, although it appears to be a common mistake made by theoretical physicists and, of course, astronomers, whose hypotheses only go out one way, out into outer space, where they drift around and come back as so-called solid proof that the sun is made
mostly of hydrogen and helium
with absolute certainty, and everyone in the discussion will be dead before someone sputters up to the sun like George Jetson or Icarus and scoops out a sample of the giant 93 million mile away ball of hot gas in the sky called the sun in the heliocentric model. The sun, which is actually much closer than that and couldn't possibly be what mainstream science has postulated for ages. And NASA simply strokes the egos of theoretical physicists to the degree that they base all of their models on the theories that were developed hundreds of years ago, and now that we, as a race of sovereign individuals, have the capacity and technology to prove or disprove this thing one way or another, the entire world has been brainwashed into thinking that we're the crazy ones for thinking outside of the pre-approved box. That is why Flat Earth is infectious, because we care about those who are unable to make the hard choice and critically examine this evidence. If you trust in science, then you must trust the scientific method, if nothing else. Familiarize yourself with the model, then try to debunk it. One thing we can rest assured of is natural phenomenon will affect us equally, whether we're aware of them or not. At any rate, these sort of discoveries show how much mystery lies very nearby but is beyond our natural ability to detect or scrutinize, but it also shows that very bright scientists, especially astronomers, are completely incapable of straying outside of the globe-Earth model simply because it's too far removed from accepted physical models of the universe, and they have no reason to assume anything other than the globe model. That's the beauty of it, in terms of the lie being rather fascinating. Our observations here on the ground work in either model, prior to in-depth study, of course, and so it's easy to understand how rational people may have arrived at the heliocentric conclusion based on a long series of misunderstandings and possibly inflated egos, pride in that which cannot be verified, pride that dies with the light of the truth. With all that being said, I still submit that the truth, the ultimate truth related to our world being a fixed plane as opposed to a
spinning sphere,
is indeed infectious, because you can only approach this topic in one of two ways. The first way you can approach the topic is indeed the most common, and that would be to completely dismiss it as nonsense, ignore it, and don't give the topic another thought. The second way to approach it is an attempt to debunk it, and there are a couple of ways this can be done, of course. You can ignore the overwhelming proof of the world being a fixed plane and begin to recite and regurgitate the well-known, perpetually repeated, typical, conventional arguments which are in support of the globe model. This position will not get you very far in any discussion with even a moderately prepared flat earther, since most of the proof of a globe is extremely flimsy and can be easily debunked. Much of the so-called solid or irrefutable proof of a spinning spherical Earth comes from NASA, which is very obviously a deceptive organization at best.
Hey, Uncle Jim?
Yeah.
My dad went to Mars.
Yes, yes he did.
I'm dehydrated. Dehydrated. Science. Manual says, look for science. Water. River bend at the bottom. Water. Hydration. Water.
Comes from NASA, which is very obviously a deceptive organization at best. And NASA has gone well beyond the point of no return in terms of the astronomical lies they've told over these past decades. NASA will absolutely never admit to being complete frauds because they would be instantly finished. It would be like the Terminator self-destructing or Superman eating a healthy portion of kryptonite on purpose. It's not going to happen. But aside from NASA's assertions and bogus images and telemetry, the typical proofs of a globe are very much like a house of cards, very flimsy and one-dimensional. However, all of the assumptions wrapped up into the illusion are held very tightly and very dearly by most of the people in the world, especially the scientists, since that is what they were taught as true and correct for their entire life. Their whole identity is wrapped up in this spherical Earth heliocentric model. One of the most important ideals or necessities involving the scientific method includes the ability to remain objective and not to grow too attached to any model. You must follow the facts with truth as your ultimate goal. The other very important step in the process is to cast aside models that don't fit the observations. If you fail to do this, then the scientific method has absolutely no purpose, and any claims you have to belief in science are actually claims of religious fanaticism, and the truth is rendered invisible right in front of your face. Good luck, and may the Force be with you.
them from the flower, Scobie, and see what's inside of them.
Right, come on.